Welcome to Simpler Bible, a daily journey to biblical understanding. Episode 74, back in 1 Samuel. We're going to look at chapters 5, 6, and 7 today. A lot to cover. Let's dive straight in. Chapter 5, verse 1. When the Philistines captured the ark, remember yesterday we left everybody dead, and Eli fell back out of his lawn chair. It's in my head, it's always been, I don't know if you remember, like if you grew up in the 70s, 80s, do you remember the lawn chairs that were like metal tubing and then had like the interwoven colorful fabric? It was like a canvas almost or something. That's what I picture. And I remember having some of those at my grandmother's lake house, and they'd get so old and so worn that they'd break through in the middle or whatever. I kind of imagine Eli in one of those chairs. In my head, it's like green and yellow, and he hears the news of the Ark of the Covenant and his sons, and he falls back, and just there's a loud clatter as his neck breaks, and that's really dark, but that's how I picture it every time, and now you will too. So everybody's dead. The Philistines have the ark. Verse 2, then the Philistines took the ark of God, brought it into the house of Dagon, and set it up beside their god Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, I love this, behold, Dagon had fallen face down on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So picture this, the ark of the Lord. You might remember this from when we talked about it back in Exodus. It's roughly 2.5, 3 feet long. It's about 2 feet wide, 2 feet deep, covered in gold, 2 cherubim with their outstretched wings on it. It gets brought into the temple of Dagon. It gets set before Dagon, this idol. And we don't know how big he is, but he's big enough that he topples over and he's laying on his face in front of the Ark of the Covenant when they come in. The priests come in the next morning. So like even Dagon bows down to God, and I just love it. I think it's really, really funny. So they took Dagon and they put him back in his place. By the way, if your God can fall over and you have to stand him back up, he's not God. I'm just saying, all right? Verse 4, when they rose early the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen on his face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord, and the head of Dagon and both of his hands were lying cut off or broken off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. That is why the priest of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon and Ashdod to this day. So get this picture here, okay? So you've got Dagon, he's standing before the ark, this idol. He falls down before the ark, and then the second day when they come in, he's fallen down again, and his head and his hands have broken off and rolled to the threshold of the doorway of the temple. Now, why am I making a big deal about this? Why am I pointing out this to you? The Philistines are going to be a key villain for the Israelites off and on for the next few hundred years. They're going to be a key villain, at least through the first few kings of Israel. And Dagon is their god. And it's interesting because you'll notice that it says in verse 5 that the priest of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon and Ashdod to this day. Now, one other little verse, you might not even catch it, you might not even notice it. Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 9, God is rebuking the Israelites. And he's rebuking them for their idolatry, and he's rebuking them for turning away from him. And he says, and they even leap over the threshold. They even leap over the threshold. The only other place that this occurs in the Bible is right here in 1 Samuel chapter, 5? 1 Samuel 5, verse 5, where the Philistine priests leap over the threshold. From that point forward, every time they go into the house of Dagon, they leap over the threshold to go into the temple. And it is a practice that we see Israel doing by Zephaniah chapter 1, which means they have been influenced by the pagan practices of the Philistines. It's a really interesting thing. It kind of makes you wonder how many things have crept into church culture over the last 500 years, 1,000 years, that we're like, oh yeah, this is a good tradition to do. How many things are we doing in church culture that's a leaping over the threshold, if you will? Anyway, it's crept into the way the Jews behave. So verse 6, the hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. When the men of Ashdod saw how things were, the Ark of God of Israel, they said, the Ark of God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and against Dagon our God. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines, 5 lords of the Philistines, remember, what shall we do with the Ark of the God of Israel? And they answered, let the Ark of the God of Israel be brought around to Gath. So they bring the Ark of God of Israel there. But after they brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against the city of Gath, causing very great panic, and he afflicted the men of the city, both young and old, so that tumors broke out on them. So then they sent the ark of God to Ekron. But the people but as soon as the ark of God came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, they've brought it around the ark of God of Israel to kill us and our people. So I want you to get this perspective here. So it's in Ashdod. The ark is in Ashdod. Dagon has fallen over twice, his head and his hands broken off. And now all the people are getting plague and all the men are getting tumors. It's speculated in some places and in some commentaries that it's testicular tumors. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But these tumors are breaking out on all the men, and that's part of why people speculate that. So it's only in the men. So then they bring it to Gath, and then the same thing happens in Gath. So they're like, the people of Gath are like, get it out of here, and they send it to Ekron, and the people of Ekron are like, oh my goodness, they sent the ark here to kill us now. And so this is just kind of how they're feeling about it. And look what it says in verse 11, 5:11. They sent therefore and gathered all the lords of the Philistines again, said, look, send away the ark of the God of Israel. Let it return to its own place. Otherwise, it's going to kill all of us and our people. For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. The hand of God was very heavy there. The men who did not die were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. The ark of the Lord, chapter 6, the ark of the Lord was in the country of the Philistines for 7 months. 7 months these people were plagued with different plagues and tumors. And the Philistines called for the priest and the diviners, the priest of Dagon, not the priest of God, and said, what shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us with what we shall send it to its place. And they said, if you send away the ark of God, do not send it empty, but by all means return a guilt offering, and then you will be healed, and it will be known to you why his hand does not turn away from you. And they said, what is the guilt offering that we shall return to him? And they said, 5 gold tumors and 5 golden mice, according to the number of the lords of the Philistines, for the plague was on all of you and all of your lords. So these 5 cities, these that we've mentioned before, you'll find them again in verse 17, Gath, Ekron, Ashdod, Gaza, and Ashkelon. All of these cities had been plagued by God. So he says in verse 5, so make images of your tumors and images of your mice that ravage the land, and give glory to the God of Israel. Perhaps he will lighten his hand from off of you and off of your gods and off of your land. And then look at this again. Why should you harden your hearts? That's key language. Why should you harden your hearts as the Egyptians and Pharaoh hardened their hearts? After he had dealt severely with them, did they not send the people away and they departed? So he's like, look, let's not make the same mistake that as the Philistines, let's not make the same mistake that the Egyptians made. Let's not harden our hearts against God. He's clearly sending plagues on us. Again, remember, that's 390 years earlier. And so they're remembering this. So they say in verse 7, now then, take and prepare a new cart, 2 milch cows or milk cows on which there has never come a yoke, and yoke those cows to the cart, but take their calves home away from them. Take the ark of the Lord and place it on the cart. Put in a box by its side figures of gold, which you are returning to him as guilt offering, and send it off to the Lord. So they're going to put in this box next to the Ark of the Covenant 5 gold rats and 5 golden tumors as offerings to God. Like, look, man, we're sorry. We shouldn't have taken the Ark of the Covenant. Our fault. I have no idea what I can picture a golden rat. I have no idea what a golden tumor sculpture looks like. But that's funny to me. And I wonder if somewhere at some point this golden tumor sculpture ended up, I don't know, like a paperweight on somebody's desk or something. I don't know. I know that's ridiculous, but these are the things that roll around in my head sometimes. So they say to watch this ark, or watch this cart. And it says in verse 9, if it goes up on its way to the land of Beth Shemesh, then it is God who has done this great harm to us. But if not, we'll know that it wasn't God that his hand, it was just a coincidence. So the 2 men did so, and they took 2 milk cows and yoked them to the cart and shut their calves up at home. They put the ark of the Lord on the cart and the box with the golden mice and the images of their tumors. And the cows went directly, straight in the direction of Beth Shemesh along one highway, lowing as they went. They didn't turn to the right or to the left, and the lords of the Philistines went after them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. Now the people of Beth Shemesh were reaping their wheat harvest in the valley, and when they lifted up their eyes and saw the ark, they rejoiced to see it. The cart came into the field of Joshua at Beth Shemesh and stopped there, and a great stone was there. And they split up the wood of the cart, and they offered the cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the Levites, because remember there are Levites scattered everywhere, took down the ark of the Lord and the box that was beside it, in which were the golden figures, and set them up on a great stone. And the men of Beth Shemesh offered a burnt offering and sacrificed on that day sacrifices to the Lord. When the 5 lords of the Philistines saw it, they returned that day to Ekron. And these are the gold tumors that the Philistines returned as a guilt offering to the Lord, 1 for Ashdod, 1 for Gaza, 1 for Ashkelon, 1 for Gath, and 1 for Ekron. And the golden mice as well, according to the numbers of the cities. Now, look at verse 19. Okay, verse 19 says, and God struck some of the men of Beth Shemesh because they looked upon the ark of the Lord, or looked into the ark of the Lord. It depends on the translation. He struck 70 men of them, and the people mourned because the Lord had struck the people with a great blow. Now, this is key. Some of your translations will not say he struck 70 men. Some of your translations will say he struck 50,070 men, which is, if you haven't done math lately, a really big difference. There is a massive difference between 70 people and 50,070 people. Here's the issue. If you do a little research, if you go back and you kind of look at some of the older writings on this, there is almost no Hebrew evidence for 70, almost none. Almost every single text says 50,070, almost all of them. There are only a few places where it's just 70. Is it possible that people were like, man, it couldn't have been that many people, let's just put 70? Is it possible because Hebrew numbers, like some of them drop out of the text? Is it possible? Yes, lots of things are possible. I'm just telling you that I promise you, whether it says 50,070 or whether it says 70, I promise you 9 out of 10 Bibles will have a footnote giving the alternate number saying an alternate number says, or the oldest manuscripts say, or most Hebrew manuscripts say 50,070 people. And so that's a big number. It's a really big number. But Numbers 4:20 tells the people that you're not allowed to touch the Ark of the Covenant. You're not even allowed to look at it. Only the high priest was allowed to look at the Ark of the Covenant. And so remember that these people, the Israelite people, have been rebellious against God. They've turned away from God, and there's a lot of sin. And so whether it was 70 or 50,070, the point of God was made. And I think I lean towards the 50,070 because that's what most of the manuscripts would lean towards. So verse 20 says, then the men of Beth Shemesh said, who is able to stand before the Lord? This is holy God, and to whom shall he go up away from us? So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath Jearim, and they said, the Philistines have returned the ark of the Lord, come down and take it. Chapter 7, verse 1. The men of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord, brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill, and they consecrated his son Eleazar to have charge of the ark of the Lord. From that day that the ark was lodged at Kiriath Jearim, a long time passed, some 20 years, and all of the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. So they don't bring it back to Shiloh. They don't bring it back to the tent of meeting. At this point, probably 50,000 people died. So they're just like, let's just drop it off at this guy's house. He's close by. We'll let that guy take care of it. We're done with it. We don't want to touch it anymore. Which kind of gives you a little bit of an indication of what the priests were like in these days. Like they weren't interested in getting it back either. It won't move for a long time. It'll end up moving when David moves it later, but we'll talk about that as we get into 2 Samuel. Verse 3, Samuel said to the house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, then put away your foreign gods, the Ashtoreth from among you, and direct your heart to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hands of the Philistines. So again, we have a godly person coming before the people of God saying, get rid of all of your idols. Get rid of all of the things that have made you to serve these false gods. And put away the false gods. Put away the false gods. This is a commandment that's over and over. Why? Because as we've pointed out over and over, these people were always about idolatry. They were always serving these false gods. Verse 4 says, so the people of Israel put away the Baals and the Ashtoreth, and they served the Lord only. That'll be just for a short period of time. And then Samuel said, go gather all of you at Mizpah, there's that is again, and I will pray to the Lord for you. So they gathered at Mizpah, and they drew water, and they poured it out before the Lord. They fasted on that day and said, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel judged the people of Israel at Mizpah. Now, when the Philistines heard that the people of Israel had gathered at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. Why they are wanting to still, like, they just got rid of the ark. They just got rid of all the plagues and all the tumors, and they're like, hey, let's go get Israel again. They're all gathered together in one place. When the people of Israel heard of it, they were afraid of the Philistines. And the people of Israel said to Samuel, do not cease to cry out to the Lord our God that he may save us from the hands of the Philistines. And Samuel faithfully prays for the people of Israel. In fact, in 1 Samuel 12:23, he'll say to the people of Israel on his way out of leadership, far be it from me that I would sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. So Samuel was always praying for the people. Verse 9 says, Samuel took a nursing lamb and offered it as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. Samuel cried out to the Lord for Israel, and the Lord answered him. And Samuel was offering up the burnt offering of the Philistines as the Philistines drew near to attack. But the Lord thundered with a mighty sound that day against the Philistines and threw them into confusion, and they were routed before Israel. I want to make this note really quickly. God threw the Philistines into confusion. We will see this all over the Old Testament, and it is consistent with the people who are contrary to who God is. So either the enemies of the people of God, or when the Israelites themselves have turned to idolatry, God will throw them into confusion. Some people will read 1 Corinthians 14:33 that says God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. and they say, see, God doesn't cause confusion. God absolutely causes confusion. It's all over the Old Testament. He causes confusion to those who are his enemies, and he causes confusion to rebellious Israel who are serving idols. What 1 Corinthians 14 is talking about is the order of a church service. And it is better translated, God is not a God of disorder, but of peace. It's talking about don't have a chaotic worship service. Let one or two people speak. So whenever you hear people say God never causes confusion, I just need you to know that that's not inherently true. What we don't see is that God ever causes confusion for those who have submitted to him. What we see consistently is the only time that God causes confusion is for those who are idolaters or those who have rejected him, and he throws them into confusion. But it's still an important thing to note that God does at times throw people into confusion. Verse 11 says, the men of Israel went out from Mizpah. They pursued the Philistines and struck them as far as Beth-kar. And then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin and called its name Ebenezer. So that's, remember I told you in Samuel, it was like Ebenezer. So remember the song, it is well with my soul, and we sing, here I raise mine Ebenezer, hither by thy help I come. So that's this. This is a stone that was set up. It was named Ebenezer, and it says, God is my help, and it means this far, to this place, God has helped us. So the Philistines were subdued and did not again enter the territory of Israel, and the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. The cities that the Philistines had taken from Israel were restored to Israel, from Ekron to Gath. Those 5 cities, the 5 cities that the Philistines were lords over, were all part of the Israelite inheritance that they keep losing to the Philistines over and over and over again. And Israel delivered their territory from the hand of the Philistines, and there was peace also between Israel and the Amorites. Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. He's the last judge. And he went on a circuit. This is important. He went on a circuit year by year between Bethel and Gilgal and Mizpah. Now, Bethel, we saw that city in Genesis 28 when Jacob is fleeing his brother Esau. Gilgal, we saw in Joshua 4. It's where the people were circumcised as they crossed back into the promised land. And then Mizpah in Genesis 31, that's where Jacob and Lot make an oath. And so he's doing this circuit between these 3 cities year after year. It's about a 20-mile loop that he's making. It's a pretty small loop if you consider the whole nation of Israel. And he's making this. And then it says, and then he would return to Ramah. I told you 2 days ago to keep that in mind. That's where he was born. That's where his mom and his dad lived. And so he returned to Ramah, for his home was there. And also, I reminded you that Deborah, she was a prophetess, and she was a prophetess between Ramah and Bethel. These are really close cities to each other. And so these cities, Bethel, Gilgal, and Mizpah, will be important. And it's important that we remember that those are the cities that Samuel regularly does ministry in, but he lives in Ramah. And it says there, from there he judged Israel in Ramah, and he built there an altar to the Lord. So join us tomorrow. Read ahead from 1 Samuel 8, 9, and 10, and that's what we will be talking about tomorrow. See you then. Thank you so much for journeying with us today at Simpler Bible through another section of Scripture where we come to know and understand God a little bit better. Look, if you're brand new to Simpler Bible, we have all sorts of resources available for you. Go to our website, simplerbible.com, and there you can find these videos, you can find our podcast, you can find links to our social media, and you can even find a blog post with additional scriptures if you want to go into a little bit more study than we had time to cover in this podcast and video today. We hope that this tool will be exactly that for you, a tool. Not something that replaces your daily walk with God, but something that enhances your daily walk with God and helps you to know and enjoy Him more. Thank you so much for being part of this, and we'll see you again tomorrow.